You're listening to Precinct 444, a podcast network from the National Law Enforcement Museum. Today we're bringing you another episode from the Encore series, where we revisit past museum programs and conversations. I'm Charles Fulcher. Today we're heading back to June 17th, 2021, when we hosted a virtual panel discussion entitled A Network of Support for Lasting Change. As we reflected on the one-year anniversary of the death of George Floyd, we saw an increased number of protests, riots, and violence, which in turn made the role that law enforcement plays in our communities more relevant than ever before. We saw a need for a more unified solution to bridge communication gaps between law enforcement officers, agencies, and community organizations that hold policing matters at their core. This discussion was an opportunity for listeners to hear from a panel of 5 astute professionals who discuss ways to bridge the ever-evolving relationship between police and their communities, and also introduce them to the Community Alliances and Law Enforcement Bulletin Network, also known as CALEB, a new social media platform designed to foster conversations like this one. Today you'll hear welcoming remarks from Steve Leganke, Global Marketing Manager for Defense at DuPont, Sharon Sales-Belton, Vice President for Government Affairs and Community Relations for Thomson Reuters. Our moderator for this program is Axel Threlfall, Editor-at-Large for Reuters. And our participants are Chief Jeffrey Glover from Tempe, Arizona, Florence Chung, Founder and CEO of Engage Public Safety, the Reverend Markel Hutchins, CEO of Movement Forward Incorporated, and Renee Mitchell, President of the American Society of Evidence-Based Policing. We have divided this program into 3 parts. In this first episode, you will be introduced to our esteemed panelists, who will then discuss common trends regarding public perception of law enforcement and how understanding those trends can help both law enforcement and the public reshape and reimagine policing going forward.
DuPont, we've been a proud supporter of the law enforcement community. We're a proud supporter of the museum and the memorial. And now we're very proud to be part of this new initiative, the CALEB platform. I'd like to start off by thanking the agencies and the community groups that are actually participating and proactively working through this platform. We were the original sponsor of the 5 communities at the museum, which really were 5 communities that were proactively working together to try to improve the relationships between law enforcement and communities. And we're hoping this helps build upon that, and hoping this network can help drive some of the necessary change that we need to improve the relationships between law enforcement and the communities more broadly. So again, we're very proud to be part of this, and thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for your participation today.
Well, thank you so much, Thomas, for the introduction. And Steve, it's always a pleasure to be partnering with you on this and other endeavors. I want to say a special greeting and a welcome to our panelists and all the guests that have joined us today. As a global information service and technology provider, Thomson Reuters is committed to helping the government and law enforcement communities perform their duties through domain expertise, trusted content, intelligently connected technologies that empower our professionals each and every day. We're very proud to support law enforcement at all levels of government, and especially pleased to partner with leading associations, nonprofit groups, law enforcement agencies, and accomplished career professionals on a series of thought leadership pieces devoted to public safety, transformation, and reform. I want to give a very special thanks to my colleagues at Thomson Reuters Institute, Reuters News, and as well the TR government team, because we've all come together to explore a variety of areas around law enforcement, including the role of technology in crime prevention, race in the color line in modern police culture, trust in community relations, in a social justice era, and then most recently, the fate of qualified immunity. In addition to these efforts, we proudly honor annually our Everyday Heroes initiative, where we highlight the exemplary men and women who every day work tirelessly to keep our communities safe. And we continue to add to a robust, dialogue of other topical issues like knowing your customer, anti-money laundering, and soon a new session on the future of Homeland Security. Today's seminar is yet another step in this journey towards supporting the vital role that policing and access to justice means for our community. Again, I want to thank everyone who made the decision to join us for this very important discussion and dialogue today. Thomas, back to you.
Thank you very much, Sharon, and thank you, Steve. Now it is my great privilege to welcome Axel Threlfall. Axel is the Reuters editor-at-large. Alongside his editorial duties, he hosts high-profile engagements and thought leadership events for and on behalf of Reuters and Thomson Reuters, such as the Newsmaker series and the Davos World Economic Forum. Thank you for being here with us today, Axel. I turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you very much indeed, Thomas, and thank you to all of our speakers. It really is a great honor for me to be hosting this timely and important discussion. This is the third, or I think indeed the fourth, that I've done with the US law enforcement community on culture, on the future of policing in America, among other things. The caliber of the speakers has always stood out for me, and I think we've got another fantastic panel lined up for you today. I always wonder how many of you out there are thinking, how come we've got a Brit sitting in London, England, leading this discussion? Maybe it's the detached, impartial observer watching things unfold from a distance, but actually I think it doesn't matter where I am. The issues that we're discussing today are issues that law enforcement personnel across the world are facing. Of course, there are differences nation to nation, but the overarching questions are the same in many countries. How different will law enforcement look? How different does law enforcement need to look in the years to come? And what will get us there? So today is an opportunity to take a long, hard, realistic look at what is working, what is not working, and if not, why not? So we're looking for a frank conversation today about moving in the right way to get where the law enforcement community wants to get and where the broader community needs it to be. And very quickly, before I introduce the panel, what became clear to me in conversations ahead of this event is just how much desire there is to get this right, and just how many networks there are pitching in to help achieve that. So this is about collaboration, about listening, learning, nurturing, open and honest dialogue between law enforcement and the community at large. So let me introduce the panelists. Florence Chung is founder of Engage Public Safety. Jeff Glover is Chief of Police in Tempe, Arizona. Reverend Markle Hutchins is the CEO of Movement Forward. Renee Mitchell is Senior Police Researcher with RTI International and President of the American Society of Evidence-Based Policing. And Chief Brian Peet comes to us from Montpelier in Vermont. And I just want to check, actually, I think our two chiefs are still on their way here. It's been a very, very busy day for both of them. And let me just check. Chief Peet and Chief Glover, are you with us now? Okay, we still do not have them. So let me kick it off with the others, and then we'll bring them into the conversation. I want to start with the context and the challenges, and then move very quickly on to some of the solutions here. Florence, this is what we're talking about here, I guess, is a big perception issue, right? I mean, give us a sense, Florence, from where you're sitting, of how dramatically the public's expectation of the police has changed over the past 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, thank you, Axel. Through the work at our nonprofit organization, we've been engaging with a lot of college students and young professionals in their 20s, so Gen Z. And the project work that we did, especially for the better half of this year, has made me realize that there are a lot of factors that contribute to perception that is not necessarily rooted in facts or reality, but is quite important. And those are fueled by the social media headlines and the posts from their peers and things that they see in the media. And of course, their lived experiences as well. But when working with these young people, I realized that they are really looking for more dramatic change. And as young people, one of the things that we know about the younger generation, they have a lot of passion and a lot of ideals and energy. What we tried to do was channel that energy into constructive paths forward. So after they were protesting out on the streets, the question was, well, what's next, right? And so what we found was that what we told them was, in order to bring about change, you need to first understand the problem. And a lot of them didn't have that exposure to the public safety world or the world of policing. Many of them didn't have any relationships with a police officer. And so their knowledge base was very limited and informed by the social media headlines. And so we found that the challenge was really palpable, this perception piece. And so how do you bring information and education and a perspective to a generation that is very fast moving and that is bombarded by a lot of information from various social media platforms and all kinds of media channels. Sure. So I would say, Axel, that's one of the big challenges that we've been grappling with, closing that gap between perception and reality.
Okay, and look, we're going to come very quickly to some of the solutions that you propose. I see Chief Glover is with us. Welcome to you, Chief Glover. When you took the role back in October, you promised, and I saw a piece today on this, to take an introspective look at sort of the current culture and where you need to go. You talked about a new era of reform, of reshaping, rethinking, reimagining policing going forward. 8 months in, how does it look? How's it going?
It's a challenge. 8 months in, we've done a lot of heavy lifting. We created, and our mayor was a big part of this, in wanting to create a mayor's public safety task force. And so we've done a lot of work where we had community members come together that were from all different aspects of the community, different varying perspectives. There's about 22 community members, and some of them also included activists that, we had marching in front of our police station just a year ago. And so being able to bring in those varying perspectives and having deep dialogue, we were able to actually come to a place where we were getting recommendations from our community. And, there's that saying that it's hard to hate up close. And so when you're bringing people together and having, a deep, meaningful discussion, one of the things that we got out of this is that we've built a relationship with many of the individuals that, at one point in time that were marching in front of our police station. Now they're calling us up and asking questions and, expressing, whether it be concern or gratitude for certain issues that have come up that we're currently dealing with. Out of the Public Safety Task Force, we had over 150 recommendations. Now, some of the recommendations, because we were doing listening sessions, there's certain recommendations that you cannot utilize because, state law prohibit, certain things that you couldn't do. But then there are some recommendations that we had been looking at that there were great recommendations, such as being able to divert 911 calls for alternative services. We have Care 7 crisis counselors, a mobile counseling team here in our city. And so we've been able to successfully be able to transfer mental health calls that do not need an officer to respond to it. We've already started making that adjustment of being able to have the right people in the right places responding to those calls. So out of those recommendations, there's many of them that we were either already doing, some that we couldn't legally do, but then there was others that, we are working with community members. And that's the big thing, is that collaboration to show that we're working with you to make sure that we're resolving issues that help to bridge the gap.
Sure. And you know, well, again, Chief Glover, we're going to come on to some of that reach out and some of those solutions. But the general sense I'm getting from you is you're moving in the right direction. Things are happening. There's momentum here. Is that fair to say? Yes, absolutely. Okay. Renee, let me bring you in. I know your specialism is very much the data and using the data to find solutions. Before we get to that bit, though, what does the data tell us about the current situation now? Is the data being used effectively in the right way for us to understand what the challenges are?
I was going to say that's such a complicated question, because I don't even know that you start with, is the data being used in the right way, before you even back it up to, is the data in a form that is usable? Because a lot of what we run into is our systems can't even communicate across platforms in some ways. So if you look at our criminal justice system across the board, you know, corrections, jails, police, and probation, our systems don't talk to each other. So often, like once a person gets out of the hands of, say, the police, we really have no idea what happens from then on with our bail, with how much time they get in jail or how much time they might spend waiting on bail. And then often when we're trying to go back, for example, and look at something simple as mental health calls for service, the way the systems that we purchase allow us to code calls for service don't necessarily let us code for all the information that we need retrospectively to look back at, you know, what is happening across the country, or even like in the case of Chief Glover, like in your own city. So a lot of times when you think about like using it in the right way, in some ways we're still antiquated, even getting our systems to be able to use good data to use in a way that's helpful in its entirety.
But I guess my question is, you know, if we, you know, in order to use data to come up with effective solutions, we need to be able to understand the context we're operating in now, right? Yes. And I guess what I'm getting from you is we're still not there yet.
Yeah, we're still not there yet. And when you're examining data, the thing you really need to have is a practitioner there in the room too. I think sometimes people try to analyze data without having anybody from the department there, or having somebody who has an understanding of the city. And when you try to do or analyze massive data sets without contextualizing it, often there's misunderstanding about how that data may or may not look. But I also do think if you look at where we've come from since the 1990s in policing, we are using data to really inform what we're doing in the field and to create evidence-based practices and to try to implement research in the policing field to understand how our practices impacts our communities and to do better in the future. So although we're flawed, as any professional industry is, I think that we are making advances to do better with our data and be more transparent and improve our systems.
Yeah. Okay. Good. And we'll certainly come back to that. By the way, everybody out there, I forgot to say this at the beginning. If you have questions, please send them through into the Q&A box. You know, I'll try and weave those questions in to our discussion, or comments as well. I'll try and weave it in as we go. If not, I'll come to those questions at the end. So please do send the questions through. Reverend Hutchins, welcome to you. We heard from Florence that this is the scale of this perception problem. Communication problem. What for you are the biggest challenges? What are you hearing from the communities?
There's a lack of real communication between law enforcement and communities, and we cannot continue to stand in our individual corners yelling and screaming at one another. We have to find ways in every community and in every corner of our country to come together at tables of sisterhood and brotherhood in every community. So I think one of the missing gaps and the things that's often overlooked is the necessity of actually engaging in productive, solution-focused discourse in local communities. The challenges with policing across the board are different based upon the demographics, the geography, and other particularities of local communities. So this idea that the solutions to the challenges that we face in this country around policing are global or even national, I think is it's a flawed notion. We have to figure out pathways forward to reduce violent crime and improve relationships between cops and communities in every single neighborhood in our country. And we do that locally through local engagements, like what we're seeing happening under Chief Glover's leadership in Arizona and in other parts of the country.
Is it hard, Chief Glover, though, to move? And I'm assuming morale is, generally, correct me if I'm wrong here, but generally pretty low right now. Is it hard to move? And we'll come on to recruiting in just a second. But is it hard to move forward in a constructive way when morale within the ranks is so low?
Yeah, it is difficult because you have to think about the way things are portrayed right now for law enforcement. They're being painted with a broad brushstroke, and they're being stereotyped. And one of the ways I describe exactly the way many law enforcement individuals and, in terms of organizations are feeling with that pressure is that they're feeling some of the same pressures that many communities of color have felt over the years of being stereotyped or painted with a broad brushstroke. And so when you have that kind of feeling that an officer is dealing with, that's, and they may not be of color, but they've never experienced that before. We are used to, in law enforcement, having the benefit of the doubt. In years past, it was very easy for people to say, yeah, we love our police officers, and right now they're not feeling that love from many people in the community in terms of, I guess, in the media and where that information is coming from. Although locally, we know that our community, really does support us. But when you have social media that is constantly telling you otherwise, and that's what you're paying attention to, the officers sometimes get caught up in that. And so it's trying to keep them focused on what really matters here in the community that you're policing, and understand that you're still supported. There's still a need for the work that's being done here, and we still have to be able to be engaged with our community members, and it has to be not a us versus them, but how can we overcome the different challenges that we're facing.
Yeah. Okay. Good. And by the way, I am noting all the comments and questions coming through in the chat box. If you can try in the Q&A box. Yeah. Go ahead, Reverend Hutchins.
I think it's a point that Chief Glover references is key and critical. It has to be the leadership in the department that becomes more innovative and more aggressive about amplifying the voices of unity and collaboration in local communities. Because I think what Chief Glover has alluded to is far too often his officers and police officers across the country are not hearing from the silent majority, they're hearing from the vocal minority. And those are the loudest voices. But the truth of the matter is that even in communities of color, there is a desire for more law enforcement, not less. But those kinds of messages get lost, and it's important that the agency heads, the chiefs, the sheriffs, the department leaders amplify those voices to help their officers to better understand that the majority of the people that they're protecting and serving really do support them. So we have to, I think, Chief Glover, continue to be innovative in the industry about elevating those voices.
I'd be interested, I'll bring everyone else back in a sec, but Chief Glover, I'll be interested to hear how you're doing that. And in fact, before you answer that, let me ask you this question. How do you describe the role of a police officer to new recruits these days? And how different is that description today than it was even 12 months ago?
Well, for me, it's been the same ever since I started over 23 years ago, is that you're a customer service representative. And I would tell recruits coming in, don't let that badge be too heavy on you and think that, you are the end all be all. You are here as a customer service representative. You're here to represent not only this organization, but you're here to represent the community at large, and you are still a part of this community. And so you're not above that. And, we used to have a saying when we would teach our ethics course is that, you have to be able to pass headline tests. And, and anytime that, you do something that is going to be contrary to, that test, AZ Post give it, then they take it away as well. And we are not immune to that. And the department will support that because we also have to hold our people accountable. And so, it's about being able to make sure that, that they stay engaged with that customer service aspect, because that is truly a part of the job. Is that, you got into this job because you said that you wanted to help people. That's 90% of everything that you hear when you go to an academy class and you're talking to them about why did you want to get into policing, and it's to help people. So it's about remembering the purpose of the mission.
I guess this idea of how you recruit into perhaps the most scrutinized profession in the US, or indeed in many countries, is one of the biggest challenges you face. Florence, let me ask you. Let's move it forward now and talk really. The meat of this is some of the solutions and how to make this work going forward. A question comes in. Can you share current examples of what is working lately to overcome some of these communication challenges?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, we're at the tail end of a 6-month project engaging Gen Zers. And trust has been a tough one for them this past year. And they came to this project wanting to do something. They are, what I found was intensely solution oriented. What was insightful for me was to see the assumptions that young people held about police chiefs when walking into these virtual conversations that we hosted between them. And they thought the police chiefs would come into the conversation as part of a PR stunt. A lot of them thought, these chiefs wouldn't listen to young people, would enter the conversation with arms crossed in front of their chests, both, literally and figuratively. And, they thought that law enforcement was largely resistant to change. And, they were quite surprised, though, and impressed when the chiefs were actually open and transparent and genuinely interested in what they had to say and articulated a desire to do better. This was all last year. And, and many myths were also busted on these Zoom calls as well. So I think, with young people, there's an element of trust, an element of hope that can be built with exposure and relationship building with law enforcement. And I know Reverend Hutchins, it's been said a lot, but no matter how cliche that sounds, it's so true. That's what we saw. I mean, most of the young people that we worked with did not have any exposure to law enforcement. So the opportunity we gave them to interview law enforcement, talk to them, meet with them. And last year it was all in a virtual environment. But through this video podcast series, we gave the young people this opportunity. And, that was critical to shifting their hearts and minds and encouraging them to ask critical questions and dig beyond the brief headlines that they see on their phones. And, that was shaping a lot of their perceptions about law enforcement.
But sorry, go ahead, Hans.
Yeah. No, and it gave them an opportunity to see the humanity behind the badge.
Yeah, I guess the proof's in the pudding, though, isn't it? I mean, it's all very well to hold events like that and see that open communication and see that hope, but you need to take it out and use it and continue keep that momentum going in the community.
In part 2 of this conversation, we will dive more deeply into our panelists' discussion and build upon some of the topics already raised, focusing on the importance of collaboration and discussion between law enforcement agencies and the public, as well as lessons learned about what worked and what didn't. Thanks to Anna Muckenfuss, our Manager of Programs and Education Initiatives, for helping write today's program, and Christopher Mitchell, our Manager of Digital Content and Strategy, for producing. And many thanks to you for listening to this episode of Encore, a Precinct 444 podcast from the National Law Enforcement Museum. We hope you enjoyed this episode and will join us again for part 2 of a network of support for lasting change. Please subscribe to Precinct 444 on your favorite podcasting platform to stay connected and to receive our latest content as soon as it drops. And we would love to hear from you. Send in your questions, comments, and feedback to precinct444@nleomf.org. You can help us make our content even better. The National Law Enforcement Museum is located at 444 East Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., and is dedicated to telling the story of American law enforcement. We expand and enrich the relationship between law enforcement and the community through educational journeys, immersive exhibitions, and insightful programs. Find us online at lawenforcementmuseum.org. Until next time, stay safe. We'll see you at the precinct.